The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your commander-in-chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. I had initially thought to do this video local, upload it, and just let it rock. But I decided to do this video live, chop it up with y'all real quick. This was a big trade, obviously. I don't think it was as surprising, but it was a bit shocking to my senses because I didn't see this coming. I knew they weren't happy with Jahan Dotson necessarily. They weren't overly impressed, I don't think, with the wide receiver group as a whole, but I didn't foresee the trade coming. But there was something off this entire time. And Dan Quinn mentioning that the number 2 wide receiver position was up for grabs, and, you know, Jahan being out there a little bit longer in that first preseason game, and them just struggling to get him involved in the offense, and then the lack of him sustaining blocks on those screens. All the telltale signs were there, right? There was a breadcrumb trail leading to this trade, and I just refused to pick up the breadcrumbs, to be honest with you. I just didn't see this coming. And so this is left a bit of a void at the receiver position. Obviously, a lot of fans are looking at this group. It's an underwhelming group, to say the least, and that's putting it mildly. And they're looking for another move that kind of runs in conjunction with what just happened, because they just feel like it's not enough at the receiver position. And I can't tell you that you're wrong necessarily, but what I can say is they may be more confident in what they're about to be able to do with the receivers that are left this upcoming season than maybe a lot of us think, right? So what this situation did, I'm going to call it the Dotson effect. What it essentially did for me is it forced me to do a number of things. It forced me to take inventory of the receiver position in Washington, the previous, wide receiver history in the first round, the current construction at the receiver position, the roster itself, what it's going to do to the receiver position this year, what is it going to do to the overall roster potentially this year, and then what is it going to do to the offense, and what does it mean moving forward, right? There's a lot of different, I think, ripple effects from the Dotson effect. So we're going to talk about a little bit of all that today. I wanted to start, I want to start by saying this. I think this is very important and needs to be said, because I think a lot of people are not taking this into consideration. While it may be a bit of a shock to the senses to someone like myself, or maybe some of you out there that may not have seen this coming, I didn't see it coming. I can't speak for you. Maybe you saw the writing on the wall. But they knew that they were trying to move Jahan Dotson. They knew probably a week or 2 weeks ago that he wasn't a part of their future. So they had already planned for this, okay? They're prepared. Them trading Jahan has not altered in any way, shape, or form what they have set out to do and what they were going to do, right? Maybe there's still another move left, and we'll talk about that here before the season gets underway. But one thing I can tell you is that they were planning for this. Jahan was not a part of their future plans. Clearly, you could see the writing on the wall. And again, the signs were there. So we may be thinking, oh my God, what are they going to do? They're like, no, we're fine. We're good, right? Look at the preseason. Look at the drives. Look at the production. Jahan wasn't a part of any of that, right? It's not like they traded a guy that was being very impactful in the preseason. We had 3 scoring drives with Jayden Daniels under center, and Jahan Dotson was essentially a non-factor in all 3 of them, right? This was without Zach Ertz playing in any of the preseason games. This was with limited touches for Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson Jr. Keep in mind that there's still weapons on this offense. We weren't going to be leaning on Jahan Dotson a ton. So let's just be very mindful of that, right? But we're going to get into the Dotson effect. So it forced the first thing this trade forced me to do was it forced me to deep dive into the receiver position and just how bad we've been at receiver and how poorly we've selected receivers, particularly in the first round. But you could look at any round. We just haven't done a good job. We all remember the disaster of a second round in 2008, right? With all the second rounders, Devin Thomas and Malcolm Kelly, right? And, you know, AGG here recently. We could keep going on and on and on. But those guys weren't first round picks. The expectation isn't as great. Second rounders, the expectation is pretty big. But third round and later, you get what you get, right? You're hoping that you hit like a Terry McLaurin in the third round, but that generally doesn't happen, right? With your third round picks. But anyway, the Commanders/Redskins have selected 6 wide receivers in their history in the first round. Art Monk was the first wide receiver taken in the first round back in 1980. Desmond Howard was selected in the first round back in 1992, the year after we won the Super Bowl. Michael Westbrook was selected in the first round out of Colorado in 1995. Rod Gardner, 50-50, old 50-50 for those of you old enough to remember Rod. Taken in the 2001 draft out of Clemson in the first round. Josh Dotson, by most accounts, my clone, taken in 2016 out of TCU in the first round. And Jahan Dotson, obviously taken most recently here in the first round out of Penn State in 2022. By my account, I can't speak for you and what you deem to be a hit. But of the 6 guys I just mentioned, only one of them is a hit. And he happened to be a home run and a future Hall of Famer. But the rest of these guys ended up being busts here in Washington. Okay. So that's 1 of 6 in the wide receiver first round department. That's a paltry, skimpy, dental floss thin 1 or 170 or 170 batting average or 17% hit rate in the first round at the receiver position. Pretty bad. Okay, pretty damn bad. Okay. So let's go through some more of these numbers quickly. Since 2000, the Commanders/Redskins have only drafted 2,000-yard wide receivers. Let me repeat this. Since 2000, the Commanders/Redskins have only drafted 2,000-yard receivers. Can you guys guess the 2 receivers? I'll give you a hint. One of them currently plays for the team. Okay? One of them currently plays for the team. Can you guess the other receiver that we drafted since 2000 that has had a 1,000-yard receiving season? I'll give you a few seconds. I'll read something else and then I'll come back. I'll jump into the comment section. With Jahan Dotson gone, the Commanders currently don't have a receiver outside of Terry McLaurin who had 200 yards receiving last season or more. Okay. No receiver on this team outside of Terry McLaurin last year, with the departure of Jahan Dotson, had more than 100 and I think the number was 180 yards receiving last season. Nobody had 200 outside of Terry last year with Jahan departing. That's the state of our receiver position right now. All right. So let's see what you guys have to say. Red Wing 01 says Gardner and Terry. JLG says Josh Dotson, Jahan Dotson don't matter. Jayden in 5. I don't even know what that means. Rockman 1033 says Art Monk and Terry. Art Monk since 2000. He wasn't playing in 2000. I don't think you understand the way I phrased it, maybe. Jay says Moss. Moss was not drafted by us. So JLG says Monk and Terry again. Since 2000. Since 2000. All right, Monk was drafted in 1980. Okay. D. Skinner says Westbrook. Bernard Parker says Rod Gardner. Yes, the answer is Rod Gardner, who had just barely over 1,000 yards in his second season back in 2002 with 1,006 yards. Is the only other receiver that we've drafted since 2000 that has had 1,000 yards receiving for the organization. It's been an abject disaster at the receiver position for us. That kind of lines up, though, with the lack of consistency at the quarterback position as well. So you have to take those two things into consideration. And then also, a lot of our production from the receiver position has come from guys that weren't drafted here, guys that were signed in free agency or traded for, things of that nature. Deshaun Jackson, Pierre Garçon, obviously a guy like Lavernius Coles, I believe had 1,000-yard season here. I think his first season was 1,000, and the next one was like he had 200 catches for 980 yards on like 55,000 bubble screens. And then, of course, Santana Moss, right? But none of those guys were drafted here. So I just mentioned to you that no receiver on the roster outside of Terry going into the 53-man roster cutdown period had more than 180 yards receiving last season. None of them had 200 yards receiving last year. Let me pile on some more on this receiver group. Outside of Terry, no receiver had more than 17 catches a season ago. No receiver had more than 17 catches a season ago. So now it begs the question, right? It begs the question. Out of these 12 receivers, and we're going to mention these 12 because these are the 12 guys we currently have on the 90-man roster right now before they trim this thing down to 53 here shortly. And 70, as DQ has said multiple times. You have to factor in the practice squad as well. Of these 12 guys, how many do you actually see them keeping? And in my mind, and this is the real question, how many of these guys are actually worth keeping on the roster, right? So we're going to get to that question here in a second. But these are the 12 guys, right? Terry McLaurin, Dami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, Luke McCaffrey, Jamison Crowder, Byron Pringle, Martavis Bryant, Mitchell Tinsley, Bryson Tremaine, Kaz Allen, Davion Davis, Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint. Those are your 12 receivers. Of those 12, half of them, 6 of them, do not have an NFL catch to their name. As a matter of fact, 5 out of the 7 don't even have an any NFL experience or appearance whatsoever, right? So Luke McCaffrey, obviously as a rookie, doesn't have any NFL experience or catch. Mitchell Tinsley has NFL experience, just doesn't have any catches. Bryson Tremaine, Kaz Allen, Davion Davis, and Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint all have not appeared in an NFL game, and Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint is a rookie as well. So it's a very underwhelming group, to say the least. We know 4 of these guys are locked to make this roster at this point. Terry McLaurin, Dami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, and Luke McCaffrey. These 4 guys are on the roster right now, without a doubt. The question then becomes, who is the 5th and possibly 6th receivers that you keep? My biggest question is, are there even 6 guys worthy of keeping in this group? Like, do you even need to keep 6 receivers? And so that my next question is keeping 5 versus 6. I think 7 is now officially out of the question. There is no reason to keep 7 receivers out of the group of 12 that I just gave you. I think that's one of the biggest things to take away from the Dotson effect in terms of the actual receiver group is that at one point you could envision a seventh receiver if you squinted hard enough and if you played around with the rest of the numbers at other positions. If you were desperate enough to keep seven, you could make a case for seven receivers with Jahan Dotson on the roster. With him removed from the equation, there's no way in hell you should be keeping seven receivers. No chance. I'm making the case that you should only keep five at this point, that there is no reason to keep a sixth receiver, right? Figure it out on kickoffs, right? Whether that's a running back there along with a Byron Pringle. Olamide Zaccheaus can return punts for you. He's already shown the ability to do that, right? There's no reason to keep a sixth receiver to me, which would allow you to keep seven safeties comfortably and not have to do too much tweaking to the roster. That's part of the ripple effect of Jahan no longer being here, is now you can reallocate the resources from the receiver position to somewhere else, like quarterback if you want to keep three, like running back, which is really big because they may want to keep four instead of three, right? Now that allows you to do that. Instead of keeping six receivers, you keep five. Now you can keep four running backs, right? Same can be said for safety. You can keep seven and not feel like you have to trim off fat somewhere else like linebacker potentially, right? So I think this gives you more flexibility. If they so choose to tap into that, they may say, no, we're still keeping six receivers. And if they decide to do that, that's fine, right? But again, is there really a need to keep six? You can get Jamison Crowder onto the practice squad. Martavis Bryant was out there all offseason, all camp until we signed him. He's been out of the league for 55 years. Nobody's coming to take Martavis Bryant from you. He doesn't have to make our 53-man roster. You put him right on the practice squad where he was with Dallas all year last year, and if you need him, you can pull him up. He just got here. He doesn't know the playbook. He needs time anyway. So you don't have to keep him on the roster, right? Are you really going to make a roster spot for Bryson Tremaine or Mitchell Tinsley? Kaz Allen is the only guy that I look at and say, if you're keeping a sixth receiver, Kaz Allen makes a ton of sense along with Byron Pringle, right? Like, to me, if you're keeping six, the six are Terry McLaurin, Dami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, Luke McCaffrey, Byron Pringle, and Kaz Allen, right? If you're keeping five, you trim off Kaz Allen and you keep Byron Pringle and you just move on there. You can get everything you need out of this group of five without, keeping a guy as a specialist, essentially, which is what Kaz Allen would be. You're going to use him in special spots at receiver because he's not really a true receiver. So you just gadget plays for him. And then you're only going to use him on special teams. And he's not a core special teamer. He's not playing on all four special teams units, right? So to me, you really don't need to keep but five receivers, to be honest. And if you're dying to keep six, okay, Kaz Allen is your sixth receiver, right? So for me, I think it's keeping 5 versus 6, which becomes a real conversation with Jahan's departure. I talked about them maybe reallocating resources elsewhere now that you have the flexibility at receiver to only keep 5 potentially. Could you reallocate that somewhere else? Here's a real conversation that I think a lot of you want to have. I've been kind of running away from this because I don't see anything happening. But is there a trade or outside move coming based off of the Dotson effect? Is there an outside move or a potential trade in the works to bolster the receiving core? I think there could be. I think there are 2 positions, if you're the Commanders, that you are looking at very closely once these cuts start to happen on Sunday. I think some teams, like we saw Cincinnati already, because they played their 3rd preseason game already. Cincinnati's already cut 11 players already, right? And you're going to start to see that as teams complete their 3rd and final preseason game, they're going to get right to business. You got to cut down 90 to 53. And so you're going to start to see teams trimming off, 10 players here, 12 players there, and you're starting to get that ball rolling. as they start to trim that roster down to get to that 53-man limit at 4:00 p.m. on Tuesday. And so I think the two positions Washington will have a watchful eye on as teams start to cut down their rosters is edge rusher and wide receiver, right? Could there be a trade coming for Washington? There could be, right? Like Amari Cooper isn't the answer. I've heard his name, boundied about. One, if you're the Browns and you think you have a chance to win, why would you trade Amari Cooper? That doesn't make any sense for you. That's one. Two, Amari Cooper's 30 years old. That's not what this organization is looking to do. They're not looking to surround Jayden Daniels with a bunch of 30-somethings. They already brought Martavis Bryant back here at 32 years old. Jamison Crowder's at 30 or over 30. I think he's 31. And Byron Pringle's 30 years old. Like, how many more 30-somethings do you need? You don't want to surround him with a bunch of older veterans. You want to have guys either at or going into the prime of their careers. So mid-20s to, 25 to 27, somewhere in that neighborhood is what you're looking for. So I think that rules out on Amari Cooper. Brandon Ayuk remains a name that people continue to go back to because of his ties to Adam Peters. I just don't see it happening. I won't rule it out. I won't say that it's impossible that happens, but I just don't see it happening. I think what I've said all along is he'll remain in San Francisco, and I think that's what's ultimately going to happen with Brandon Ayuk, at least for this upcoming season. We'll see if he gets a long-term deal or not and what happens with that situation. But it feels more and more as the days pass that he's going to end up in San Francisco. And then T. Higgins isn't going to be traded this season, right? The Bengals have no interest in getting rid of one of the guys that's going to help them potentially win a Super Bowl. With their window, as I mentioned, closing after this season slightly because Higgins' departure is going to force some other receiver to have to step up and fill big shoes. Trey Hendrickson could be out of Cincinnati after this year. He wants a contract, wanted to be traded. Of course, they didn't meet his demands. And so this is a big season for Cincinnati. They're not trading T. Higgins in a season like this. Unless something goes awry with Burrow, where he's out again, and they get to the trade deadline and realize that, we need to get something for T. Higgins. There's no trading for T. Higgins. So ultimately, I don't see a trade being the way that they upgrade the position. I see them scouring teams' releases and the waiver wire and kind of checking to see if there's a, 5th round receiver or a veteran even that they really like. A surprise cut is what I think it's going to take. I don't think it's like somebody brought up Russell Gage, like that's not the kind of guy they're looking for. It's got to be a surprise cut with a guy who has NFL chops as a vet. And even if that happens, Carolina might say, hey, we'll try him on for size first, right? Because they're not, their receiver position is better than it was last year, but it could still use some work without question. So keep that in mind. We're not first, we're second. And the team in front of us is first because they suck. So, and they weren't that good at the receiver position. Now, they did go out, trade for Deontay Johnson. They did draft Xavier Legette. They still have Adam Thielen. So their receiver position isn't as bare as it once was. So they may not be looking for reinforcements, but you just never know, right? In any event, I think it's more likely that they sign someone in free agency after the cuts have been made than trade for someone. But that's just my thought process there. So there's been a conversation that I've seen floating around about, will this move impact Jayden Daniels at all, if any? I still go back to the preseason and the effectiveness of Jayden Daniels, despite really no contribution from Jahan Dotson. You could tell that there was continuity issues with the two of them. Now, again, I think Jayden just missed that out against the Dolphins to Dotson. His first incompletion of the game was that out that he threw to Dotson, which I don't know if it was a timing thing or if it was a depth issue or what, but that ball wasn't even close to Dotson, right? Meanwhile, every time he throws to Dami, it's on the money. Every time he throws to Terry, and he's trying to hit him, not throwing it out of bounds, trying to get rid of the ball, or dirty throwaway, or dirty throw, as they call it. Anytime he's throwing it to Terry, it's right on the money. There was clearly a disconnect between those two. Jahan Dotson had 2 catches in the preseason, and one of them came from Jayden Daniels, and that was on a slot screen, right? The other was a bobble and then catch versus the Jets from Jeff Driscoll. So, again, I don't know if this will really impact Jayden all that much from a, man, we're going to miss Jahan because he was a playmaker for Jayden perspective. I don't know if we will or not. I can tell you that Jahan, just being on the field, was a guy that you had to pay attention to. And he was another weapon for them to get the football to. But, we'll see how they're able to circumvent that. I have my theories and my thoughts. I've already told you this on a separate show, that I don't see them being in situations where they're putting more than 3 receivers on the field at a time. I don't see any formation where there's 4 receivers on the field at once. I think there will always be a tight end on the field, and there will always be a running back on the field. At times, there'll be 2 tight ends on the field. At times, there'll be 2 running backs on the field, right? Which will then lessen the likelihood that you have more receivers on the field. If there are 2 tight ends on the field, there's probably still a running back on the field, which means there's probably only 2 receivers on the field, right? There could be, sets where there's 2 running backs on the field, both Eckler and Robinson on the field at the same time with a tight end. That means there's only 2 receivers on the field. There are going to be formations like that where you're not featuring as many wide receivers. And I don't see any formations that are going to have more than 3 wide receivers on the field at a time. So if that's the case, you can circumvent, and that the loss of Jahan Dotson won't be felt as badly if you're putting 3 receivers on the field and it's any combination of Terry McLaurin, Olamide Zaccheaus, Dami Brown, and Luke McCaffrey. Here's the only thing that I'm a little weary of, and probably most of you are as well, is none of these guys have produced at a high level in the NFL outside of Olamide Zaccheaus. His biggest season came in 2022 with the Atlanta Falcons when he had over 500 yards receiving, maybe 522 or something, 580 something like that. It was 500 and some odd yards, right? No receiver on this roster outside of Martavis Bryant has over 600 yards receiving in a single season. Jahan Dotson didn't have that himself. But Martavis Bryant's season where he had that was, 2016? I mean, what are we talking about? We talking about 9 years ago? I mean, what are we talking about? So, again, you're asking guys to step up. You're asking Luke McCaffrey to come of age, maybe a little bit quicker than he would have had to if Jahan Dotson were here, right? He would have been essentially the 5th option if Jahan were here. Now he's thrusted up to the 4th option, and depending on how health goes and how the situation may be dictated, he may be the 3rd option in certain weeks, right? So he's going to have to grow up a lot faster at the receiver position. You're going to be asking a lot of Dami Brown. This is a guy who has never had 200 yards receiving in a single season in his career. Never had a 200-yard season. Not a game, a season. This is a guy that has not been hurt, has not missed time. He just has not had the opportunities, but he also hasn't had the production. And again, a lot of that is tied to opportunity. But you're asking a lot of a guy who's never done it at that level. Doesn't mean he can't. Doesn't mean he can't. And he's looked good this preseason. And that should be something that is encouraging to all of you as fans, right? But that's still somewhat of a crapshoot, right? So Olamide Zaccheaus, I know he's capable. I'm not really too concerned about him. I'm more concerned about Dami and just the consistency. Can he carry that load? Can he shoulder that burden of being a number 2 receiver? It's not easy being the second best option. Somebody's going to have to take some pressure off of Terry because we're back to square one with Terry McLaurin. It's like until somebody out of this group of Olamide Zaccheaus, Dami Brown, and Luke McCaffrey step up, until someone out of that conglomerate says, hey, y'all got to pay attention to me every week or else, teams are just going to take Terry out of the game. And I would go into the game saying 17's not going to beat us. Let's see if any of these other clowns can. We're right back to where we were in 2020 with Terry McLaurin. And we've been searching for a tag team partner for Terry since his rookie season, where he established himself as a force to be reckoned with. We've been searching for an answer ever since, and we haven't found it. It wasn't AGG. Clearly, it wasn't Jahan Dotson, at least not for this group. And so we're still on the prowl. We're still searching. At some point, the search is going to come to an end. I'm just afraid that by the time we find him a tag team partner, a road dog, he's going to be out of his prime. I mean, how many more prime years of Terry McLaurin do we actually have? I'm hoping that there's 3 or 4 more in there. But each year that passes and each year we're having the same conversation, it's another year that we've wasted prime Terry McLaurin, right? Hopefully somebody steps up this season and says, hey, if you bracket coverage Terry, I'm going to make you pay. Hopefully that guy's Dami Brown, but I really don't give a damn who it is. And that's the beauty of Cliff Kingsbury's offense, is that hopefully multiple guys are touching it. These tight ends are going to open up the seams and force teams to really pay attention to the tight end position again here in Washington, because they really haven't had to pay attention to our tight ends. They haven't been difference makers. Zach Ertz has been Jayden Daniels, one of his favorite targets in camp. If that continues into the regular season, it's going to open up the field for the receiver position. Because if you have to worry about the tight ends and what they're doing over the middle of the field, you're going to then have to take away attention from Terry McLaurin and the other receivers, and that could open up some plays for them. So hopefully, and then again, the running backs can also be receivers out of the backfield too, and them running the football helps. Because if we're running it effectively, that pulls the safety down into the box, that extra defender, and again, that takes away from the ability to then double cover or bracket coverage Terry McLaurin. So all of these things can be done to take pressure off of Terry, help the passing game, help these other receivers out. I don't think, and again, let's not act like Jahan Dotson was a 920-yard receiver a season ago, or 2 years ago had 1,100 yards receiving. He's never had over 600 yards receiving in his career in his first 2 seasons. But he's been a steady 500-yard receiving receiver each of the last 2 seasons. And so collectively, you're hoping one guy, picks that void up and surpasses it this year, whether it be Dami or Olamide Zaccheaus, whomever. But collectively as a group, they're going to need to be able to produce, right? That's the thought process. So I think another big takeaway from Jahan being traded, the Dotson effect, is we now have 4 picks in the top 100 after having 6 picks in the top 100 a season ago or a draft ago. We're going to have 4 in the top 100. The fastest way for this roster to improve is to continue to add top-level talent. Top-level talent comes in days 1 and 2 of the draft. I'm not telling you can't find gems in day 3. We are hoping that we unearth 1 or 2 of them this past year, like Jordan McGee, for instance. They're really high on him. Hopefully he comes back from the meniscus injury, ready to rock and roll and help. And that's not something that lingers and continues to be an issue for him moving forward. But they really think they got themselves a really good linebacker in Jordan McGee. We will see, right? And so not that you can't find guys in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, but the real damage is done in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd rounds. And as you can see, if this draft that we just had is the foundation for what we're about to build, which we think it is, with Jayden Daniels, Johnny Newton, Mike Sainristil, Ben Sinnott, Brandon Coleman, and Luke McCaffrey, if this draft is what we think it's going to be, those 6 players right there are going to go a long way in helping shape and mold this team moving forward. And if you got 4 more picks like that next year, that's going to help fast track us, right? You know, so again, that's a big part of this trade, getting that 3rd round pick. It's a massive part of that deal, right? So, my last question is, will the wide receiver position be minimized this season? I don't think it's going to be minimized. We don't have a fullback, right? So you're not going to see us in these big formations. I liken it to 2012, right? And I always harken back to 2012 because that was the last time that I felt like, from a talent perspective, we had to get really creative, right? With the Shanahans, with a young quarterback, with an offensive line that was a bit sketchy, which is kind of similar situation we're in right now. I think our offensive line is better than the 2012 group, but we don't have a Trent Williams on this group, that's for sure, right? But outside of Trent Williams, that entire line was questionable at best. So they did a great job of scheming it up. They did a great job of keeping NFL defenses on their heels. You have a similar situation here. And I thought they did a great job of, hiding the receiver group that wasn't great outside of Pierre Garçon that year. And again, Pierre was injured in 2012. Remember, the Griffining play, that catch and run, he injured his foot on that play and missed the next 4 or 5 games and really was never fully healthy that year, but he still was really good when he did play. But, I mean, again, that was Josh Morgan. That was Aldrick Robinson. Logan Paulson was the tight end because Fred Davis got injured in that first Giants game. Like, it wasn't a super talented group, and they made it work that year. Now, we had Darrell Young at fullback on that roster, so you add a fullback, but I think you can see similar things being done here, right, with this group. You got 2 tight ends that really 3. I think they really like John Bates as well. And Bates is showing me a little something as a pass catcher, right? So you got 3 tight ends you feel like you can throw the football to. You got 2 running backs. And if they keep Wiley, you got 3 running backs you can throw the football to. But if they don't keep him, and even Nick McNichols, you can throw the football to him too. But you got 2 backs you really trust out of the backfield, 3 tight ends. And then, again, I think you can minimize the impact of the back end roster guys at receiver. You don't need as many guys to contribute if you stay relatively healthy at that position. In between Terry, Olamide Zaccheaus, Dami, and if you have to tap into Luke, you should be fine with those 4 guys right there, right? Which is why I said you don't need to keep 6 receivers. You can keep 5, right? Anyway, I digress. We'll see what happens, right? I feel like there's a lot that has transpired here with the Dotson effect. As far as the roster is concerned, do you keep 5 or 6? Do you reallocate the extra spot that you've picked up on the roster now somewhere else? Is there a move coming? Because without this Dotson trade, we would not have been thinking that a trade needed to take place, or that we need to scour other teams, table scraps, or, things that they're discarding to see if we want to add. But now all of a sudden that feels like a reality for us, right? So a lot of different things coming out of this. And it also it forced me to go look at just how inept we've been selecting receivers. I think all of that is about to change now that we have Adam Peters on the case. Chef P is going to change all of this. The next time we draft a 1st round wide receiver, it's going to be a dog, right? The next time we draft a receiver in general, whether it's the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round, Adam Peters is going to go get us a dog, right? He was a part of the group that drafted George Kittle. We might have drafted George Kittle reincarnated here in Ben Sinnott, right? He was a part of the group that, drafted Brandon Ayuk and decided to trade up to get him, right? So I think they're going to find us a dog at receiver at some point. You just got to be patient. Just got to be patient. So many of you want to trade and go get a guy. Just got to be patient. They may sign somebody in free agency too next year. You never know what's going to happen. So anyway, I digress. But we're going to go ahead and transition into the comment section and read your comments and react to them. But before we do that, let's get a word from one of our sponsors. What's going on? It's your man Louie T here with a public service announcement that you must hear. I recently went on a trip to St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands. It was beautiful, but it was also hot, very hot. And you felt it immediately getting off the plane. You were sweating in the shade. And you know who my best friend on that trip was? Wasn't my mom, wasn't my dad, wasn't my sisters, wasn't even my wife. It was my Mando starter kit. That's right. Mando saved the day. I didn't have to use that raggedy hotel soap bar. I used my Mando body wash. I needed those wipes. I've told you, I love wipes. Those Mando wipes were clutch for all of that sweating that I was doing. And of course, whole body deodorant never, ever seems to amaze me as to how good it is able to control those odors and that wetness. My goodness, it was sweat everywhere, but that Mando came up clutch. And I've told you why so many different times Mando is so clutch. It's a whole body deodorant and it's safe to use anywhere. And it's vegan, I may add. Pits, package, grundle, balls, feet, belly button, butt cracks, whatever. It's safe to use there. It aggressively controls odors for up to 72 hours, and it's available in 4 cologne quality scents: Bourbon Leather, Mount Fuji, Pro Sport, and Clover Woods, my favorite being Mount Fuji. Control body odors anywhere with Mando and get $5 off your starter pack. That's up to 40% off with the promo code LouieT at shopmando.com. That's shopmando, shopmando.com, and use the promo code LouieT to get you $5 off. The summer's hot and odor is ridiculous, but you don't have to deal with it if you use Mando. All right, so let's get to the comment section and discuss some of what I talked about, some of the topics I've brought to the table, to the forefront, and see how you guys feel about some of this stuff. Ultimately, I just want to say this. Ultimately, I think we're going to be just fine. I have nothing but the utmost confidence in this group. If this were the group from last year or the group before that, or any team run by Vinny Serrato, Bruce Allen, or Daniel Snyder was still here, I would be really questioning what the hell we're doing right now. But I have nothing but the utmost respect and trust in this group and what they're building and the messaging and really the foundation that they're setting. And I think we're going to be fine. I really, truly do. And having watched the preseason and seeing just how minimal of an impact Jahan had, you know, what's crazy is Eagles fans fail to realize, and anybody really, you know, Giants fans, Cowboys fans, everybody that are, you know, piling on us and acting as if we just gave them, you know, Devontae Adams or something, or we just gave them Tyreek Hill, right? He wasn't a part of their future. To get a 3rd round pick for a guy that might have gotten cut, I mean, I don't think they were going to cut him. But if you're willing to trade a guy, it means you're willing to cut him. To get a 3rd round pick for a guy that wasn't going to be here long term, that's a win. It's the same thing I said about Sam Howell last year. To get a 3rd round pick for Sam Howell, a guy that was not going to be a part of our future clearly, to flip him for a 3rd, that's stealing is what it felt like. I'm not telling you we just stole, because I think Jahan Dotson is going to be good for the Eagles. I just think it's a win-win for both teams. You know, we'll see, right? Anyway, I digress. So let's get to the comment section quickly. Real Davy Productions, everything. I was about to say everything. Real Davy Productions, everything. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, if Han can be cut Reeves, watch your 6. I'm not saying, I'm just saying Peters equals Demure. Look, I don't think they're cutting Jeremy Reeves, but I did mention it briefly, and I said it was a fleeting thought that passed through my cabeza. In one ear, out the other, I said, what am I doing? And then to hear the way Dan Quinn, this is the thing Dan Quinn never did for Jahan Dotson. He never showered him with praise. He never used him as an example of how we want to do things here. He's used Jeremy Reeves as an example and a standard on special teams at least 3 or 4 times. He even named a category after Jeremy Reeves, right? There's no way they're cutting Jeremy Reeves, bro. Not happening, right? I just can't see it. Just like Marcus Mariota. He literally showered Marcus Mariota and serenaded him with praise when he talked about Jayden Daniels being named the starting quarterback here, and called Marcus Mariota sharing his 9 years of gold of experience in this league. There's no way they're getting rid of Marcus Mariota, right? So I hear you. I hear you, but I just don't see it happening. Darnell Cali, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, we will have good quarterback play, can make underwhelming wide receivers great, and we will have great QB play. Well, I've heard since this whole thing has, happened with Jahan, I've heard a lot of people, again, I'm trying to run as far and as fast away from the Texans comparisons from last year. But every time something happens, it seems like we get closer and closer to the Texans instead of further and further away, right? CJ Stroud was fantastic in his rookie season last year, and he elevated what was a very subpar wide receiver group last year that looked a lot like the one that we're putting together. Their skill group, if you look at their skill group from a season ago, it looked a lot like the one we have right now. Think about it like this. Last year, CJ Stroud, rookie quarterback. Now, D'Amico Ryans was a first-year head coach. And the first-time head coach. Quinn is not a first-time head coach, but it's his first year. So similarities there. Receiving core. They had my man from Michigan, who just got the deal this, offseason, who played his ass off last year. But before last year, I don't think he had Nico Collins. I don't think Nico Collins had I don't even think he had a 400-yard receiving season up until last year where he exploded, right? I think the most yards he had in the season was 390-something, right? I could be wrong about that. But even if it was 300 or 400, he went from 300 or 400 yards to over 1,000, right? Now, we already got a 1,000-yard receiver. They didn't have one until Nico Collins did it. So we already got Terry. We're starting out a little bit better than them in that regard. They had a rookie in Tank Dell. We have a rookie in Luke McCaffrey. And then they had Noah Brown, who was like this cast off from Dallas, who they weren't expecting much from. And then he kind of jumped onto the scene and had a really good season for them. That could be Dami Brown or Olamide Zaccheaus for us. You never know. They had a veteran tight end that they brought in Dalton Schultz. We brought in a veteran tight end in Zach Ertz, right? And so you could see some of the similarities. They had a second year back in the running back from Florida who played really well in his rookie season. And then they brought in Motor Singletary as a change of pace and a 1-2 punch. It was supposed to be Pierce and Motor Singletary, and then Singletary ended up taking over. Well, we brought in a back similar to Motor Singletary in terms of his skill set in Austin Eckler, and we still got Brian Robinson Jr., who's way better than Pierce was, right, or is. So you look at it, there are a lot of similarities between the Texans and their skill group last year and what they were able to do. Their offensive line was not great last year, but they did have Laramie Tunsil. We don't have a Laramie Tunsil, but we got a Sam Cosmi. It's not the same, but anyway, I said all of that to say this. I keep running from the Texans comparison from last year, but we're a lot more alike than we are different. But again, I'm not putting that kind of pressure on Jayden Daniels to transform the organization in just one season. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone. This needs to be a collective effort, right? The defense has to step up. You know, the skill guys have to step up around Jayden Daniels, and then Daniels has to do his part, right? And if that all takes place, if that all goes down, then you could see some similar results. But to your point, and I did all of that to come all the way back around full circles to your original point, which is if you get really good play at the quarterback position, he can elevate the play of others around him, including a receiver group that right now on paper is very underwhelming. So, you know, we'll see. The Phillies Ace 34. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. The Phillies Ace 34 writes, my guy, Louie T, you know you always refuse to take my hand and join the Eagles fan base. My friend, it is time for you to detox. Y'all may be going for IU. Do you trust Johnson as your OC? Our offense was 8th. He's not our offensive coordinator. He has input on the offense. Our offensive coordinator is Cliff Kingsbury. But, you know, if Kingsbury takes the job, say 2 years down, because I think Cliff's going to do a really good job here. He's going to turn some heads with a young quarterback, and somebody else is going to look at Cliff and say, hey, you did a pretty good job with Kyler Murray. You did a really good job with Jayden Daniels. How about you come and groom our young quarterback and be our head coach? And he said he doesn't want to be a head coach, but that changes, right? You know, you stay here for a couple of years, you have some success, you have some fun, and then I think he'll be ready to be his own guy again. And at that point, maybe a guy like Brian Johnson assumes the offensive coordinator role again. You know, we'll see. But he's got input as to how this offense is going to be constructed and, you know, how they're going to build it around the talents of the guys that they currently have. But he's not our offensive coordinator. I could never leave. My blood pumps burgundy and my heart pumps burgundy and gold blood, bro. I could never be an Eagles fan. And I never want to be either. After seeing how that fan base operates, I'm good right where I'm at. But I always appreciate you, the Phillies Ace 34. I always appreciate you. Brian Hancock, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Brian, thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, Diami has the talent to have a 1K season. He did it in college, so the talent is there. Howell was throwing to him. I know it's college, just saying. You're not wrong. He has talent. I've always said that about Diami, that he has talent, right? I don't think that I'm not going to ask Diami to post 1,000-yard season. That's asinine after this man has never had a 200-yard receiving season in his career the first 3 years, okay? The man has a combined 400 and some odd yards in 3 years. And again, this is not him dealing with injuries. It's just not producing and not having many opportunities. That said, we saw what he did against the Titans in that one game. He can do it. And with more opportunities, which he's going to get this season, I could see Diami having a 7, 8, maybe a 900-yard season. If he goes for a rack, if he goes for 1,000 yards, I am going to be blown away. Absolutely blown away. I'm not saying it's impossible, because I think he is talented enough to do it. But that's a big, tall, tough ask of a guy who's never had 200 yards, let alone 1,000 in a season. So I'm going to keep my just like this season, I'm going to keep my expectations reasonable and say that I think he will. If he's healthy, he'll eclipse the 500 that Jahan has given us in his first 2 seasons. I think he'll do that, right? Because we have a responsible offensive coordinator, and we've got better quarterback play. Who are we kidding? That makes a massive difference. So I think that he'll be in the 600 or 700 range. Anything above 700, and this is a phenomenal season for Dami Brown. Hell, anything over 500 yards, and I'm going to be singing the praises of Dami Brown. Anything over 600, and I'm going to be like, wow, what a season. Anything 700 or above, and I'm going to be like, Dami Brown, I'm sorry. I'm going to apologize to this man for us holding him back this entire time. Right? Because you were definitely capable and we just didn't give you the opportunity. Right? Anything over 700 yards and we were holding this man back. We were holding him back. So I don't know if he'll get, I don't think 1,000 is reasonable to ask of him, but 500 is, 600 is not out of the question. 700 is crazy. And for a guy who hasn't done it, and we'll see. You know, I think that's very possible. Very possible. Christopher McLaurin, my guy, Chris, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Chris, thank you for your generosity as always. Chris Mack writes, hey, Lou, what's up, Chris? Hope all is well with you and the family. Likewise. Likewise. Says 3 questions, 1 and 2. What do you think the impact of Dotson leaving is on Terry? And do you expect more double teams on Terry with our current wide receiver core? And 3, who do you see as our Z receiver and why? So Dami is the Z right now. If you watched that Dolphins game when they started it out, Dami lined up at the Z, Terry lined up at the X, and then you had Jahan and Olamide Zaccheaus and a mixture of guys mixing it up in the slot. Now they will move those guys around. Terry will be in the slot. Terry might line up at Z, but most of the time Terry's going to be at the X. That's been one of the knocks on Cliff Kingsbury. We had this conversation, during the breakdown of the Miami Dolphins game that, one of the knocks on Cliff is he doesn't move his receivers around a ton. There's not a lot of shifts and pre-snap motions to confuse the defense. It's pretty set. You get the running back going in motion a bit in his offense, but that's about it, right? So Diami's going to be the Z, pretty much, right? Luke will get some work at Z, at X at times. Same with Olamide Zaccheaus, but traditionally, when we line up, Terry will be your X and Dami will be your Z. What do I think the impact of Dotson being traded will have on Terry? Yes, I do believe Terry's going to see some double teams and some bracket coverage to begin the season. I would. If I'm Tampa Bay, I'm saying somebody else is going to have to beat me other than 17. Okay? Somebody else is going to have to beat me. And I don't think that anybody else can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shade my coverage towards the side where 17 is. I'm going to tell my corners to be aggressive, attacking anything underneath. You got safety help over the top on 17. And then I'm going to say, hey, I'm leaving you on the island with the rest of these dudes because I don't think they can beat us. Get it done, right? And I can be aggressive. I can come after the quarterback. I can blitz. If I feel like I can guard Olamide Zaccheaus and Dami Brown one-on-one and double Terry, you got essentially 7 defenders to play around with now. Obviously got to account for the tight end and the running back out of the backfield. But theoretically speaking, when you feel the need to, you can rush 5. You can blitz an extra defender, overload a side, overload protection, get them the slide protection, send the blitz from the other side, right? Now that guy's unaccounted for. There's things you can do to speed up Jayden Daniels and not feel like you're compromised on the back end because who's going to get me? I got 17 taken care of. Who's going to get me? So it's going to be imperative that Dami and Olamide Zaccheaus make teams pay and do it early so you take some of that pressure off of Terry. Same with the tight ends, right? You get a one-on-one matchup, you got to win. They turn you loose up the seam, you got to make them pay. So I do think there's an impact on Terry. Absolutely. And I think that impact is what you named. Terry getting double team, bracket coverage, things of that nature, where it's going to be tough on him. It's going to be tough on him. Silver Fox, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, Silver Fox writes, hey, Lou, what's going on, Silver Fox? Thanks for the Saturday chat. Hey, no problem. None at all. He said, you just said it. We're going to be just fine. We all have to remember who's in the kitchen. And that's right. That's my point exactly. Keep in mind who's in the kitchen. If it were the old group, then I would say, yeah, probably need to be a little bit more need to be a little bit more vigilant of what the hell's going on, and maybe you should be worried, right? But with this group, I think knowing that we got Chef P in the kitchen, we got DQ, and we got all these guys, I think you should feel really good about what they're doing and just trust the process. I think that's ultimately what you should feel, and that's how I feel. And so I feel good. I feel good. All right. So Christopher McLaughlin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. My guy Chris, thank you for doubling up. And once again, thank you for your generosity. My guy Chris writes, "Hey Lou, for those wanting to pick up Brandon Ayuk, we are going to have to sign Terry to a contract extension after the season, especially if he has a Pro Bowl season. 2 questions. Who do you think is wide receiver 5 and 6 as of now? And number 2 is Michael Wiley RB3. So yes, if Terry is in fact your guy, and I don't see any way that he's not their guy. You know, he's the model of consistency. He's the example that you look to set for your other young players on the team as to how you go about business. I truly believe that Terry's going to have a really good season, and you're going to look to extend him, as you mentioned, after the season. So there is that. We're in a financial position where you can afford to extend Terry and still pay another receiver. The question is, do they want to go that route, right? Or do they want to go the young route? You know, if there's a stud receiver coming into the draft, or let's say it's a draft like this one that we just saw, where there's a ton of talent at receiver in the first round that you love. And let's say we end up with the 11th pick in the draft. One of those guys conceivably could fall in your lap, right? I'm not saying that that's what you would need to do with your first round pick this upcoming year, because, you know, the season is going to dictate what's the most pressing need for this team and what direction maybe they should be looking in at you know, once we get to draft time. But you know, there's going to be ways to handle the receiver position. And again, a lot of that is going to be determined by how things fare this year with Dami Brown and the rest of these receivers. If Luke McCaffrey has 500 yards receiving in his rookie season and Dami Brown goes for, you know, 982 yards, you're going to re-sign Dami. You're going to give Terry the extension. And now you're looking at your receiver position all differently now. You still may draft a receiver. You still may go out and sign a T. Higgins, but the likelihood is, if Dami is what they think he can be, if Terry is what we know he is, and Luke plays well, you may not have to do all that much to the receiver position other than add another body, whether it's a young guy in the draft or a veteran in free agency, right? So a lot of what ultimately will happen will be determined by how this season goes and how guys perform. If it's underwhelming from the rest of the guys not named Terry McLaurin, then yeah, something massive will be done next year, whether it's go out and try to get a guy like T. Higgins, you know, or draft someone fairly high in the draft, or, you know, sign some other free agent wide receiver, or trade for some guy on a team, right? Like the Texans did with Stephon Diggs, right? So, you know, we'll see what happens. Who do I think are receivers 5 and 6? I've already essentially told you. Byron Pringle is 5 for me right now, and Kaz Allen is 6. If you know, again, this is based off of what I think they're going to ultimately do. If we're talking pure receiver, like who can help right now, Jamison Crowder is your 5th option at receiver. But, you know, again, I'm talking about what I think ultimately they're going to decide to do. Pringle helps you on kickoffs and can help you at receiver. And and Kaz Allen has the ability to do multiple things. You know, hell, Cliff Kingsbury said, that he's not Deebo Samuel, but he could do Deebo Samuel-like things and be that kind of a player for us in this offense. And I'm like, what? But if they put him in at running back against the Dolphins for a reason. Yeah, he did fumble, but he also didn't look bad with the football in his hands. And they have done some things this offseason, or this preseason rather, to let him touch it in a multitude of ways. He touched it twice in the Jets game, one off of, jet sweep action and just like a little, touch pass as he's running across the formation out of gun. And then the other was a wide receiver screen, and both of them were nice plays. I think both were negated by penalties, but they were nice gains. Both of them, I think, went for like 9 or 10 yards. And then, they handed it to him in the run game. They think he can be a guy that can do, a lot of different things. So I think that's gonna, if they were keeping 6, he'd be the 6th guy right now. And then is Michael Wiley RB3? I think so. Again, DQ has already told us what the pecking order is, and I think they value special teams ability before they value your ability to help as a third running back potentially. You got to be if they're keeping 4, Wiley's on the roster without question. If they're keeping 3, it still might be Jeremy McNichols because of his ability to play on special teams. Because they're not, when the season starts, you got to keep this. They're not going to be using that third back very often, right? When the season starts, if everything goes according to plan, that third running back won't see the field very often, if at all. So I do think that if they are leaning towards, can a guy help in an offensive capacity, then Wiley's without question RB3, and it's not close. But I think it's still Jeremy McNichols. I wanted to be Wiley because I know he's more talented than Jeremy McNichols. But they like Jeremy McNichols on special teams a lot. So the Phillies ace 34. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. My guy, Key himself. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Key himself writes, pray for Lou. Had a dream. He got a second set of twins. I got a story to tell next week on the podcast. So stay tuned for that. And I heard your jokes. I got another sponsorship, and it coincides with that conversation. So hang tight. The Phillies Ace 34. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. The Phillies Ace 34 writes, Louie, are Phillies pulling a collapse? Can they win? They're coming back to the pack. I mean, with the way the season's gone for Atlanta and everybody else in the division, you should be up by double figures in the division. You should be up by 12 games like you were earlier this season. Instead, you're up by like 5.5 or something to that effect. And we just took 2 out of 3 from you. Easily could have swept you. We see you a bunch more down the stretch, right? We really haven't played each other all that much this season. So I think you're going to hang on. I really do. But I wouldn't be shocked if you collapsed, because remember, we're still the top dogs, even though we got all these injuries and the roster doesn't look anywhere remotely close to what it was supposed to look like when the season started. We're still the big dogs, and you still hear footsteps, just like the Mets did last year or I think it was 2 years ago when we hawked them down. You still hear footsteps, but I think ultimately you're healthier and you'll be able to kind of stand up to this surge, and you'll be fine and you'll win the division. I don't even know if I want the division because that hasn't done anything for us. Maybe wild card is where we need to be. Maybe, right? Maybe that'll turn the tables and we'll be able to beat you guys this time instead of you beating us after we win the division. Who knows? Jay Sampson, stand up. You are the newest member of the MOBB mob. You know what to do. Show Jay some love. Welcome him with open arms. Jay Sampson, welcome to the squad. So glad to have you on board. Key himself, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes 9-8, wild card loss in Green Bay. Crazy or reasonable? If 9 can get you in the NFC, it's not crazy to think that they could win 9 games. I don't think they're going to win 9 games, but that's not that far off of where I think they are. I think they're a 7-win team. You know, if Jayden Daniels exceeds my expectations, they're an 8-win team. If the ball bounces our way, field goal kicking goes well, we create turnovers, I think Jayden's going to take care of the football. But he's not the only one that's allowed to turn it over, right? Turnovers can happen anywhere. Special teams, receivers, running backs, tight ends. Everybody's got to do their part to protect the football, to protect the Duke. But if we win the turnover battle and we get to the end of the season and we're +7, we're +5, we're +7 on the season, we're +10, then yeah, 9-10 wins definitely within reach at that point. So, we're going to need a lot of things to happen for us to win 9 games, but it's not far-fetched. It's not like it's 10 or 11. Like, I think that's asking a lot. If 9 is a playoff berth in the NFC, I could see 9-8 and a loss to Green Bay in the wild card weekend. You're assuming that the Packers are winning their division, right? Because if you're 9-8 and you're getting to the playoffs, more likely than not, you're the 7th seed. So you're telling me not only are the Packers winning their division, they're probably one of the best teams in the conference, and that means Detroit took a step back, but which could happen, by the way, which is not far-fetched either. So it's reasonable. I said all that to say that's reasonable. It's not something that I would predict, but the record isn't crazy. 9-8 isn't a crazy record. Green Bay is a good team, and it's not crazy to think that you can sneak in the back door of the playoffs at 9-8 and lose in wild card weekend to a better team, right? Sure. None of that is outrageous. None of that is far-fetched or too hard to fathom, right? Darnell Kelly, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. My guy, Darnell writes, I'm on week 1, Yaya Diaby outside linebacker. Sometimes his hands in the dirt has me worried with our tackles, but if BC holds his own, our line will be okay. So Yaya Diaby he's hurt right now. Now, he should be back, theoretically speaking, for week 1, but how effective is he going to be coming off of an injury and, having, I guess a week of practice? He should be fine, but they hope to have him back. It's not a guarantee that he'll be back for week 1. They hope to have him back. We'll see how we hold up, if he's out there, he'll be a good test. He'll be a good test. He'll be a really good test for what's to come, right? Because the Giants the next week, you're getting Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. So we don't know what it's going to be, but they better be ready. I just know that much, right? They better be ready. Mike Leslie, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Mike writes, 1 Eagles, 2 Commanders, 3 Cowboys, 4 Giants. Hot take. I've seen people, configure the division that way. I do think there's this sense that the Cowboys are going to take a step back this year. I still don't buy it. I don't think they're going to be as good as, they've been the last 3 seasons where they won 12 games each of the last 3 seasons. But I do see them at 10-7. I do see them taking a little bit of a step back. I do. But I think it's good enough to still make the playoffs as a wild card team and have a shot. But if they finish behind us, they've had a really rough go of it. And not only are heads going to roll, is Dak Prescott even back? That's when you got to start asking crazy questions like that. Because if they're third in the division, that means they finished either tied record-wise with us and we won the tiebreaker, which, again, let's go with Key himself's 9-8, or you finished at 8-9 below 500 and you missed out on the postseason and it was a disaster of a season. Either way, if you finish in third, and like the Commanders aren't winning 11 games. So finishing in third means you either just crept over 500, which is not acceptable for Dallas at this point, not with Jerry being all in, or you're under 500 more likely than not, which means you had a disaster of a season, which probably means something drastic happened, like Dak got hurt again. And then I think most people have the Giants finishing in last just because of their quarterback situation. Daniel Jones stinks. So Giants fans they'll continue to say, well, we can beat you. Well, we'll see about that. I feel different about now we got Dan Quinn. I feel different about that, but we'll see. We'll see about it. I'm not going to talk as much shit as I have in the past because I once this group shows me that it's okay to talk shit, I'm going to start talking shit again. But I need to see it first. I've put my foot in my mouth enough times to know, all right, let's just see what happens. And that's kind of the approach I'm taking this year anyway, and I've told you guys that. So I'm gonna hold firm on that. But I do think we're gonna beat the Giants this year. But again, we'll see. Last time we played them in week 2, we beat them at home, right? Thursday Night Football. Dexter Lawrence jumps off sides, gives us a do-over on the missed field goal, and we win. 30-28, I believe that score was, or 29-27, one of the two. Either way, or 28-27, whatever it was. I like our chances in week 2 against the Giants at home again, but we will see. Twin D, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy Twin D writes, I was just chilling, and then you hit me with the not so subliminal reminder about the Braves running down my Mets a couple years ago. Really, LT? It was only for context purposes. It wasn't a shot at the Mets. I mean, I don't mind taking little, subs at the Mets, but that wasn't the intent. It was just to remind him that, hey, we've got experience doing this before, right? We got, and also, you owe me a drink, right? I know you haven't forgotten because every time we talk, you always remind me I owe you a drink. And we've already discussed on this trip to the Dominican Republic that I'm going to get that drink. So looking forward to that. But it wasn't to take a shot at your Mets. It was to remind him, hey, we're fully capable. And we know how this works. And we've done it before. That's all that was. Sorry that I had to drag you into it to make my point. Video channel. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Video channel writes, need Ron brought up on fraud charges immediately. Look, man, it's easy to use Ronald as a punching bag. He endured a lot here. Ron put his foot in his mouth. Okay, that was the biggest thing on his way out the door. Instead of him just leaving gracefully, Ron decided to put his foot in his mouth and to leave on brash terms, like wanting to make these grandiose statements, like I left this a better place than where I found it. Not exactly. When y'all win a Super Bowl, make sure I get my ring. No, not gonna have that happen either. So, he said a lot of outlandish things before he left instead of just saying, you know what, we did a shit job, on the back end of this thing. Started with promise, didn't improve the roster the way we needed to. Never found that quarterback that we were searching for, and so we didn't get it done. Instead of him just leaving modestly and saying, you know what, good luck to y'all in the future, he decided, I got to beat my chest. I got to stick my chest out and tell you all the shit that I did to help you before I leave. And we're like, you didn't help us do shit but find the ultimate answer, which was Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and company. You being so inept put us in a position where we were able to attract the best general manager candidate out on the streets last year. Because without the number 2 overall pick, without all that draft. Now, I will say, and I said this before, the one thing Ronald did do was he was fiscally responsible. They didn't go out here and spend frivolously. They probably couldn't because nobody wanted to come here, right? It was hard to give the money away to people because players didn't want to come here to play. However, they didn't spend, They didn't spend frivolously, and that put us in a position to have all that cap space, to have the number 2 pick in the draft because he sucked. And then, you know, all of those draft picks that they forced Ronald to acquire by trading Montez Sweat and Chase Young put us in a position to get Adam Peters and land Dan Quinn and again, put us in the position that we're in right now. So we do owe him some thanks for some of that stuff. Okay. Key himself. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Key himself writes, speaking of Green Bay, I found LTN after the 2015 loss. Well, you've been rocking with me for almost a decade then. Shout out to you. I remember that loss, and I remember feeling like, hey, this is the beginning of something special. Like they're going to sign Kirk in the offseason. Jordan Reed's coming off of the greatest season we've ever seen statistically from a tight end in franchise history. You got Deshaun and Pierre for one more year. And I thought we were going to re-sign at least one of them that offseason along with Kirk. We dropped the ball on all of those things. Didn't get Kirk done. Didn't get either one of those receivers done. Jordan Reed never was able to match the level of health nor consistency that he had in 2015, even though he was good in 2016. And, you know, the rest is history, right? The wheels fell off. Antonio Brown twerked on us in week 1. Dustin Hopkins missed a bunch of kicks that would have allowed us to make the playoffs that year, including the miss over in London versus Cincinnati. Don't get me started going down the 2016 rabbit hole because we should have made the playoffs that year and we should have had a winning record. And I'm not talking 8-7-1. But anyway, glad you found the channel after that Green Bay game and have been rocking with the kid ever since. Really do appreciate you. Mike Leslie, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, also, what's with the command post before the Commander's name change? You and LB the GOATs. So the command post was the Redskins report. Every time it shifts. So when we were the football team, it was the Washington football team. It was the football team. It was football team nightly or something. I don't remember. I changed it to something, but I wasn't going to, you know, create a whole new, you know, like banner for it and everything because I knew it was temporary. So, but it was something else. But it, you know, when it first started, it was the Redskins report. That's what everything was called, the Redskins report. And then it was Washington Nightly News. That's what it was. Washington Football Nightly News, I think it was. Washington Football Nightly News. And then it, you know, obviously transformed into Commanders Nightly News, CNN. And that's where we are now. And then, you know, the command post for the Commanders. So, yeah, it's been an evolution over time. I've had to change every single time they've changed, but I think I'm going to be here for a while. Although I do think there could be a change in the future, I don't think they're focused on that right now. I know they're not focused on that right now. And the longer it stays Commanders, the less likely it is that it changes. So we will see. But anyway, I digress. That's the Dotson effect, folks. You know, 5 versus 6 at the receiver position. 7 is out of the question with Dotson no longer in the picture. We don't have a single receiver who had 200 yards or more receiving last season other than Terry McLaurin on the roster. We don't have a receiver last season had 17 catches or more on the roster other than Terry McLaurin. So clearly, this receiving group on paper leaves a lot to be desired. Another failed first-round wide receiver for the Commanders. You know, I've went over the history. 6 first-round receivers taken in franchise history. Only one of those 6, Art Monk, was a hit back in 1980. Howard in 92, and Westbrook in 95, and Gardner in 01, and Dotson in 16, and Dotson in 22. We haven't had success drafting receivers, but I think that all changes with Adam Peters. Chef P's in the kitchen now. Chef P's in the kitchen now. Adjust your palates. You've been used to eating dog food and all of the other shit we've been fed. Now it's time for some real meals. So looking forward to seeing all of that change, right? But a lot of questions, a lot of ripple effects from this Dotson move. Let's see how they handle it. Again, I said this at the top. They are prepared for this. They are fully prepared. They knew he wasn't a part of their future. So they're not scrambling right now. They created this effect, this ripple effect. They created this, so they already knew what they were getting themselves into. Key himself. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Key himself writes, I've been a LouieTeeN, okay, TN, since the days when you were recording on a Motorola Sidekick 2 in someone's basement. You've come a long way. I have. I've said this many a times. The start was not pretty, but it was definitely humble beginnings. But you got to start somewhere. And I always encourage people who are looking to do this, just start. You may not have all of the materials you want. You might not have the mic you want. You might not have the camera you want or the setup you want, but just start, you know. Everybody starts somewhere. Just start. And as you grow, you'll be able to get all those things that you want, and you'll be able to show the improvements based off of the growth, right? But just start. I started somewhere. I literally started in front of a bookshelf with a lamp in darkness. My first video was horrible. Okay. I cringed looking at that, but I had to start somewhere. So really appreciate you rocking with me the entire time, essentially, and watching the growth and the evolution and being a part of that. So shout out to all of you who have gone through that journey with me, and shout out to you, all of you who are just joining the journey. Either way, wherever you came in to the process, wherever you jumped into the mix, I appreciate you. But that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this Saturday edition of the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up, take command. Obviously, we will be live tomorrow night following the Commanders-Patriots preseason game, Sunday Night Football. Listen to what they have to say. See the fellas one final time before roster cuts are made. Big week coming up, you know, in terms of content as we prepare for the start of the 2024 NFL season. And so we'll be all over the place. Super Friends stream next week. I think I'll be jumping on with Rio, I think, next week at some point. You know, a bunch of podcasts. I think I have a podcast almost every day next week as we start breaking down these divisions and things of that nature. So a lot of content coming your way next week. Hope you are ready. I got one more super chat here from Mr. HTTR. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, signed up for the exclusives yesterday. Ready to get this money. I sent out your emails, your confirmation emails this morning, as a matter of fact. Everybody sign up. Playing adds so much excitement to the season. You heard the man. LouieTeeNetwork exclusives. Let me see if the links are in the description of this video or not. I'm not sure. I'm not even going to hold you. But I'm going to check right now. Even if it's not, you can go to my X profile page, and it's pinned to the top. All of the links that you need are there at the top of my X page. And so sign up, pay your registration fee. No, it's not in there, but sign up, pay your registration fee, so you can just go to any video that has anything to do with the LTN exclusives on the channel. It'll be in there. You can go to any of the videos where I'm talking about like a preseason game or anything. It'll be in those videos descriptions as well. But the easiest way to do it is just go to my Twitter, you know, go to my X profile page and look at the first comment there that's pinned to the top and click on those links to fill out the registration and then pay your fee, right? PayPal or Cash App is where you pay. Fill out those forms, and $25 for the Winners and Losers League and $20 for the Sole Survivor. And yes, I couldn't agree with Mr. HTTR more. It adds so much excitement to the season when you're a part of something, whether you're a fantasy football, participant, or you're in one of these leagues with me, or the Survivor pool. It just adds an extra element of excitement and gives you something to look forward to other than just the Commanders playing, if you are interested. So thank you for that public service announcement, Mr. HTTR. Truly do appreciate you. LT, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. LT writes, only law real about what Dotson does for Philly. Chip. I don't know what more you want from people. You literally, so many Eagles fans are dying for people to tell you now you got the best this or you got the best that. He helps. But it's still like, what is it going to mean? What does it all mean? You only got one football to go around. You already got 2 stud receivers. You got a really good tight end. You got Saquon Barkley. You got a new coordinator. What more do you want from me? I've told you, he improves your roster to championship level. We'll see. But he's a good football player. I've said that a number of times. But I don't know what more y'all want, because your defense might still stink. Like, don't act like your defense wasn't one of the worst in football last year. Your defense might still be trifling. Who knows? We'll see. You might have to outscore teams to win games. Still got to get the football to all these guys. So we'll see what kind of an impact he has, right? He's a damn good football player. And he'll help without question. Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the command post. Y'all get out of here. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will reconvene tomorrow after preseason game number 3, and the preseason is officially in the books. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys then. Until then, you guys take care. Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your day.